Um, Hare Krishna, everyone, and I am so honored to be here at these strange and crazy times. So thank you for inviting myself and my husband to share some of our thoughts with you. Um, I I was thinking about how we're just all collectively in this situation together throughout the world. This um, being forced to adapt actually to a whole new pace of life. For some people, they're working harder than ever if they're in the medical field, and for others, they're working from home or they're working less. Um, I'm One of my adaptations is getting used to being in the same house with my husband. Um, we He usually is traveling a lot, and I'm usually up really early in the morning to go to the temple, and he comes in late at night from work. So we hardly ever see each other on a regular basis. So suddenly we're in the same house for the last 3 weeks, and we're doing okay, right? Vraja Vihari, who's not exactly a GBC, just to let everybody know.
Thank God, yeah. No,
Do you want to tell everybody what you are?
no yeah, I deal in conflict resolution and I work for the government, working with Native Americans and their conflicts with the government. And I also started something called ISKCON Resolve, which is trying to resolve conflicts within ISKCON.
Mm. Okay, so good. So, um, adaptability isn't a new thing. It's been going on since, one could say, time immemorial. We've been the ability to adapt to our circumstances. It's like a muscle, and we use it all the time, sometimes unconsciously. And I hope to speak towards this idea of being very conscious about how we adapt to our situation, particularly as devotees of Krishna, and wanting ultimately to adapt in such a way that our sweet relationship with Krishna is kept intact and our connection to him kept alive and as strong as possible. So even the whole theory of evolution, the whole idea of survival of the fittest, it's all connected to this sense of adaptability. Checking out your environment and seeing, how or in which way you can best survive, really, what to adapt, what to change, what to let go of, what to hold on to. And for each one of us, it's a very personal, internal decision-making process. For each one of us, this lockdown, this shutdown from coronavirus has affected us all in very different ways. And we all have to navigate that. We're constantly adapting and surviving in the world. Prabhupada would call it the struggle for existence. But so it's nothing new that there's pain or struggle or people dying from terrible diseases, but because suddenly we're all doing it at the same time. So there's a lot of just focus on death and dying and struggle and survival and, how to make it out of this in one piece. So it's just interesting. We have nothing else to distract us from facing this kind of existential crisis of hopefully asking, and people asking themselves, well, why are we suffering ultimately, and what can we do to address that question as we're trying to adapt? So you'll be asking yourself, and I'd like you to ask yourself, how am I responding to this situation? How is my ability to respond? How's my ability to be flexible and agile? How's my ability to take advantage of this and, work it to my advantage? Not on all levels, not just physically or emotionally, not just spiritually, but keeping all levels on track. So we see in our teachings many situations where the protagonists of our various shastras have to adapt. Arjuna, we begin with Arjuna. He wanted to run. He wanted to leave the battlefield. And this wasn't a sudden surrender, although his crisis happened and maybe even surprised himself as he was drawn in the middle of the battlefield. But he was preparing for this battle for a long time, and he was a warrior. This is what he did. This was his identity. So, hey, he just wanted to, his first mood of adaptation was, I got to get out of here. Right, Vraja Vihari?
Yep. Get out of this place by the Lord Shri Krishna's grace.
So he was vulnerable. He was nervous. He did not quite know what to do, and so he had to. He was making a choice, wanting to head in one direction, and then Krishna, being his good friend at that point, says, "Well, wait a minute. You know, there's a lot at stake here. You have to really think about how you're going to deal with the situation, what your decision or choice is going to be." So that was Arjuna, and with the help of Krishna, ultimately made his choice to do what Krishna wanted him to do, and to, set his head or his mind into what was needed from him and how he could set his consciousness to actually do that. Do you want to add something to that, Braj?
No, not yet. You're doing great.
Oh.
I'm learning.
So then if you look at somebody like the story of King Parikshit, who was bitten by a snake, right? And he was given 7 days to live. Now that one was really out of the blue. He wasn't expecting that at all. And so often in our life, we'll be forced to adapt. Sometimes, we have some time to plan it out. Other times it happens more suddenly. And he also had a choice how he wanted to respond to that. He actually could have counteracted the curse, but he didn't. He chose to head off to the river, sit by the Ganga for 7 days, and really prepare himself to leave this body. So his adaptability, his ability to adapt, to respond, to be able to respond, he had a radical response in his situation, to respond to a radical situation. But again, the barometer of his choice was what could best serve my relationship with Krishna, what could best serve my ultimate spiritual journey. And that has to be an anchor for all of us as devotees of Krishna. As we're looking to adapt, how do I hold that most important thing in place, no matter what my circumstances are? That's the challenge in difficult circumstances. Our adaptability becomes weak when there's a lot of pain, or when there's a lot of suffering, or when there's a lot of just disturbance in the air. So later on, I'll speak about a few things that can help us make those decisions. But Raj, do you want to have any more examples of great souls and adapting in hard times?
Well, it's just I just find it would be great if we could hear from folks on the call what they're doing. I find I've been talking to some of my friends, and that's been really interesting. I was talking to Radhana Swami lately, and recently, and he's cooking for himself, and because he has weak lungs, so he really has to be away from everybody, right, in order to make sure, because if he gets COVID-19 with his weak lungs, he could really be in serious physical trouble. And from what I understand from devotees that have spoken to him and short conversations, he's having a great time, just like cooking for himself, cleaning the place he's living in, and not, having, servants and people, stumbling over him all the time. And I've seen that with some of the devotees who are used to traveling constantly. They're just finding it, they find it kind of an interesting balance, because personally, they're really having a good time, not traveling, maybe more time for talking to friends, maybe more time for hearing and chanting, and for people like that, maybe a little more time to sleep. Some of them are very sleep deprived. They're always on the run and trying to serve, Krishna so selflessly. But also they're almost afraid to say that. And I think that's probably true for some of us also, because we know how much suffering other people are going through, right? It's great to say, just like in my job, I work for the federal government. So all the people that come to me to talk about this and that, because that's kind of my job, they all have jobs. Everyone, so far, at least in the federal government, has a job. And it's a reminder to me that there's a lot of people in the world, as we see by the unemployment statistics here in America, who don't, or like a lot of you guys are in school, and we were just talking to Yash before we started, and class, everything's online, and I've been talking to some devotees who are professors, and they're adjusting to the whole online thing, and some schools are worried about finances, and other schools are saying the new freshmen are thinking, like, I'm not gonna go to NYU because that's right in the middle of the city where all the viruses are. I'll go to Ohio University in the middle of nowhere, and so there's so much upheaval yet, and so people who are doing well, they're kind of afraid to say that because they know how much struggle is going on in the world, and I think that may be a dilemma for devotees always. If a devotee is, on one hand, connected with Krishna and feeling good about that, and on the other hand, like Prahlad Maharaj said, always feeling the misfortune of people in general. So that kind of balance, that's kind of the stuff I'm hearing. So I find devotees, for the most part, are adapting relatively well. And at the same time, because they have connections with the world, I feel for those that are struggling. Does that help at all, Ananda?
Yeah, yeah, thank you. I think we may all be finding how this sudden stop in our usual schedule has brought, good things to our life on different levels, right? Either I know for me personally, I'm catching up on things, or I'm slowing down, or I'm feeling like I have a lot more time to think things through. So I think everybody will get, and again, I can only speak from a place of kind of, having more time, whereas other people, as you say, have less time because they're just maxed out if they're on the front line. So if they're doctors or anything. But I also think that the ability, that the idea of adapting, or the ability to adapt, means you take in, you have to do it within your context. But it's really built into our teachings in the Gita, in the 12th chapter of the Gita, chapter 12 of the Gita. Krishna tells to Arjuna to fix his mind on him. And then the next verse 9, he says, if you can't fix your mind on me, then follow the principles of bhakti yoga. And then he says, and if you can't do that, try to work for me. And if you can't do that, then try to act giving up the results of your work. And so he provides this invitation to options. And ultimately, he's saying, find your place, find the sphere that works for you, find the timetable that works for you, right? So that way we can, whether sometimes we're able to do more or sometimes we're able to do less. And here I'm particularly talking about time with Krishna. But find what works for you, because in the middle of all of this constantly changing world, we're all changing together now, but we'll go back to normal where we're all changing in different ways, that you have to have an anchor. And the adaptability is to be able to read your environment and then, adjust it, adapt it to make it work for you, whether it's coming closer or whether it's stepping back. we have to find what works for us individually. And I think that's what adaptability means to me. We want to feel in control. It's natural for us to feel in control. We have to feel safe. To feel safe is essential. And so staying connected to Krishna will give us that, but it also gives us the kind of level-headedness or cool-headedness to make those decisions on what to adapt, what to keep, what to let go, what to know that's not in our control, what's to know that's in our control. And a lot of that we do with what Krishna did with Arjuna. We have a friend or we have a mentor to talk with or talk to. We have this amazing mantra, our Maha Mantra, which really is very strengthening and cooling for the mind. I always get, I hope ultimately, of course, I'm going to get love for Krishna from it, but I always get a lot of just grounding when I chant my rounds. And then I also think something good for adaptability is to take, get some fresh air, go outside, take a walk, get things moving. If you are faced with decisions around adapting to a changing environment or an environment that you're not quite comfortable in, but you have to be in for the next few weeks until things spread out again a little bit more.
I was thinking two things. One is probably Srila Prabhupada was amazingly adaptable. I mean, we can't really, it's a little hard for us to imagine what he did. He's coming from this incredible Vaishnava culture and living in Vrindavan in the 1950s. And prior to that, having a father who's a Vaishnava and the Bengali culture that he grew up in. And then, of course, living in Allahabad. And then he goes to the Bowery and he hangs out with hippies. People are like haven't bathed in 2 weeks, and I was young at that time. I was probably 7 or 8 years old. I was 7 years old when Prabhupada came. I'm from New York. When Prabhupada came to New York, but because my brother was 6 years older than me, growing up, so I would took part in the protests against the war in Vietnam and things like that, even though I didn't really know what was going on, because I had this older brother who would take me to Jimi Hendrix concerts and things like that, and Janis Joplin concerts and stuff. So I was part of the scene, even though I was young. And what Prabhupada had to do to adapt to speaking to us, and to and to make Krishna consciousness make sense to us. Now, of course, a lot of you guys on the call are much more pious background than me. I was just one of those guys from New York who grew up, one of those people that Prabhupada saved. So Prabhupada was incredibly adaptable and incredible at the way of balancing tradition with relevance and the changing times and adjusting things. Just incredible. That was one thought I had.
Just to carry on that thought, and I'll let you.
No, I'm sorry, I won't let you.
Yeah. Okay. Adapt.
No, go ahead.
One time the devotee said to Prabhupada, "You are so conservative," and Prabhupada was like, "You have no idea how liberal I am."
Well, since I jokingly interrupted you, that so we've been married just about 30 years now, and I've spent more time, like Ananda said, the last 3 weeks with her than ever before. And actually, she's a pretty nice person. Surprise!
Okay. I'm not going to say what you are.
And then the other thing I was thinking of, you used the word adaptability. I was thinking of the word resilience. And human beings can be quite resilient. I remember, again, let's see, people on this call. God, I feel really old. When the Y2K thing was happening, maybe you heard about it. You're probably 1 year old or something like that. At the turn of the century, there was some people in the world and even some devotees who thought that was just going to be the end of it. Forget it. We're going to go back to the Neanderthal man or something like that. All the computers are going to melt away, etc. And one of my best friends, and even our son's godfather, his name is Shonaka Rishi Prabhu, He's the director of the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies. Really, really wonderful devotee. And he's also really into history. So I remember him telling me that, we just don't know. It's not, he said, just look at Germany and England now, and just 50 years earlier they were all bombed out completely. People know how to be resilient and get back on their feet. So I was just thinking about that example, and how I think when we're put in a tough situation, we can be a lot more resilient than we think we can be when we're kind of in a cushy situation. I don't know, is there a way, what was your plan, Devi, about getting feedback from folks on the call?
Well, we're going to take questions in a minute, but I just wanted to finish up.
Comments, I hope, yeah.
Questions and comments and additions and discussions. We had been asked to speak for about 15 or 20 minutes and then open it up.
Oh, okay. Well, you've been going 25 minutes. Go ahead.
No, we didn't start till 5 hours. Oh yeah, you're right. Okay. All right. I was just going to go over the Gita values with adaptability, because I thought, then I'll just briefly say that the Gita values are my favorite 6 values taken from the Gita to help guide our life. So choice is one of those values, and adaptability really, really encourages us or invites us into holding the choice about how we want to run our lives. Humility, and I think this idea of adaptability, because it really demands humility to adapt. Sometimes, that famous story of if we have time later, we'll take it, of the lighthouse and the captain on the ship. But, to change yourself, to make the adaptations, to change yourself, and not expect change from others. I mean, that's really living into this culture of humility that we need to cultivate within ourselves. Acharya, being the one who adapts, again, leading by your own personal example. Equal vision, I really like this idea in adaptability, because it shows that we really feel that it's not all about me, that the other person or the environment I'm in, while we're talking about adapting to other people generally, is there's an equality there. There's a sense of, I need to respect that they are also got a place in the world, and I need to work with that. Ahimsa and affection, both Gita values, and both can be seen through this eyes of adaptability, that I adapt so I can be of best service to others. And with affection, knowing that ultimately I'm adapting so that I can be my best self, and therefore help not only myself, but when I'm at my best self, I can be at my best for others. Okay, so now we can open it up for anybody who'd like to add on to any of these comments, or may have a question or a point to discuss. And we went over 25 minutes because you spoke so much, Prajna.
Story of my life.
Thank you so much, Mataji and Proji. So for everyone on the call, the way that we'll do questions is if you click on participants and the raise hand, we'll be able to see if you have a question, and then we can unmute you from there so that we don't have like 5 or 10 people trying to talk at once.
Well, we just want at least one person. Oh, a comment. There we go. Darcy has one.
Vindapriya should be able to go.
Hare Krishna! Thank you both so much for the wonderful talk. I was so excited to see this event posted, so thanks for making time for this. I was thinking about what you were saying, Vraja Vihari Prabhu, about guilt and how some of us who haven't lost our jobs, who are doing well, kind of feel like a little bit guilty that we're doing well and maybe hesitant to talk about that. Do you think that can hold us back from seeing all of the opportunities for learning about ourselves and all of the just benefits that this time of slowing down has brought or could bring?
Oh, I like that. Yeah, it is a great opportunity, and Prabhupada would say that devotees are like a good business person, that they can a good business person. If you know the stock market at all, you can make money when the market is up and when the market is down. Even when the market is down, you can short a stock, basically hoping that the stock will go down, and then you make money on that. And he said that devotees like that in good times or in bad times, easy good times or bad times, they can find Krishna. So. And then, we had the prayer of Queen Kunti, which I don't think we necessarily have to adopt. We have enough troubles in our lives, but, she said that, may these calamities happen again and again, because every time there's a problem, I think of you, and you appear, you come to Hastinapur and take care of us. And so she was actually praying for calamities to happen again and again. So I like, Vrindapriya, your point is, devotees, the Prabhupada once said, devotees are as thoughtful as a non-devotee is speculative. So this is a great opportunity to be thoughtful and to come closer to Krishna. I guess what I was thinking, well, this is probably showing what a bad person I am, but at least externally, I don't want to tell too many people, oh yeah, it's great. I'm just working hard, and I spend more time with my wife, and we're eating well, and I'm exercising, because that might not go over so well with other people who are having a hard time. But I like what you're saying, that for us as aspiring devotees, it could be a really great time to think about life and to become maybe more serious. It's one of my challenges. I tend to be lighthearted and joking a lot, and so it's a challenge for me to try to think a little bit more soberly. So thank you for bringing it up. Other thoughts on that, Vrindapriya?
I'd like to jump in just to say that I think there's a lot of sensitivity needed. I think we are in a place of privilege, most of us. Maybe, I don't know everybody on the call, but I mean, I'm not talking about people who are suffering actually from coronavirus, but there are a lot of people who really are, who have lost jobs and have no source of income. And so I think there is a sensitivity demanded that we can be grateful that we're in a good situation. We can feel some guilt. Some guilt is always a good thing. I was raised Irish Catholic.
Catholic girl, yes.
We had plenty of guilt, but too much guilt can also just make us really mental and not present in the moment. So yeah, being grateful, also being sensitive. But again, it's like, before coronavirus, we were doing what we were doing, and there was people struggling and suffering all over the world. I was on another call with people from Mexico who were saying, this is just another lousy situation for Mexico after our last lousy situation. So there's so many people who are always struggling, and we tend to forget that. So now, like, so I think sensitivity is needed. Otherwise, there is such a big disparity between, the haves and the have-nots in this country or in the world, and that in itself is a painful thing. So be grateful, be sensitive. But if you are in a situation where you really have time to, go internal or slow down and decide, wow, I need to change some of the things in my life that being too busy has not allowed me to do, then this is a really good time to make those changes. Really, really good time for that.
I think you touch upon a good thing about that idea of gratefulness. You know, I think if you're grateful, it's kind of like, is that balance? You know, you can still, you know, gratitude is such a great, is it an emotion to have, right? It's a nice thing. I can't say I do it every day, but I think Rukmini Devi, she was saying how, you know, you should wake up every morning and think of 3 things that you're grateful for. It's probably a really good practice. Does that help, Priya?
Yes, thank you so much. I really love the quotes. I had never heard those quotes before, that a devotee can do well when the market is up or down, and that they're as thoughtful as the karma is speculative. But I also really like the point about being sensitive to everyone's situation. And I think one of the things I was thinking of when I said the opportunities in this are, just like you were saying, Ananda Vrindavan Mataji, that like there has always been inequity in the world. There have always been people who are suffering. But I think one of the things about the coronavirus is it's right in our face, like we can't ignore it. Mm-hmm. And so it's also an opportunity to think, what is my role in this? Like, how can I help? What can I do for even the devotees in my community if I can't see them, but I know like someone's out of work? Or can we start a GoFundMe? Can we do? So it's been an interesting opportunity to reflect in that way as well.
Yeah. Ananda's been calling a lot of the people in her congregation, just, you know, out of the blue and saying, how are things going? Is there anything the temple can do for you? And they really appreciate it. Also, we've been going for a walk almost every day, and we notice how friendly the people are these days. Another interesting byproduct. I'm sure you're all experiencing something like that. Other comments, questions, thoughts? Yes.
Thank you so much for having this conversation with us. I was just wondering, you had mentioned the examples of Arjuna, Prabhupada, and the other great souls. How can we apply what they went through and their adaptability to our current situation, and how can we connect to them?
You want to do that one, Devi?
That's a great question. And I think, you know, our tradition, our books, our teachings, they're all stories. They're all stories of people in all kinds of difficult situations. You think about it, Prahlad and the earth having to be rescued by Varaha. Even Krishna book, Krishna is all the time fighting off those demons and finding all kinds of ways to become adaptable to make sure he gets to the demons before the demons get to the devotees. So yeah, I think all of our teachings, Arjuna, and then you mentioned Prabhupada, we can learn so much from others, and we read their stories, and some of the stories will resonate with us more than others. But all of their stories are stories of challenges and difficulties. You mentioned Kunti, but you know, there's grandfather Bhishma, there's Yudhisthira, there's, right?
Bunch, yeah.
You know, well, Ajamil, I was just hearing about the Ajamil story today, and you know, at different times, it's funny, since I've been at home, I've been appreciating books, because I've picked up books that have been lying around forever, and finding things that are speaking to me from, you know, different books and different books on bhakti. So there's a thing called, what's it called, Braj? Prayerful reading, or Lectio Divina, which is again, it's kind of in the mood of slowing down, which this coronavirus has done for all of us. We've been geared down. Again, I'm assuming all of us, but I'll speak for myself. If this idea of when you're reading, or when you're going to read the Gita, where you're going to read and try to give yourself 10 minutes, put your timer on 10 or 15 minutes, choose a story, choose a lila, and just kind of request, please let this speak to me. Please let me identify or relate with this person who's going through this and how they're discovering themselves and their relationship with Krishna through that. And ask yourself, how does it relate to my life right now? Mm-hmm. And again, every book and every time you read a book, it'll speak to you differently. And you'll find that. And if you just go to it with some openness, some open-heartedness, and saying, I need to hear. Because again, if the goal of our adaptability, of course we have different goals, we have to do it but if you're talking about your heart goal, your relationship with Krishna goal, then how can I gain something from this reading that can influence my consciousness, that can help me think through a situation, that can give me some shelter, some solace, some direction, some like, wow, yeah, some hope. You can get many things from these very live and kind of conscious books. I know that's kind of sounds funny, but I think that's there.
One thing to add to that, did I cut you off? Did you finish?
No, go ahead.
You know, sometimes we can think, well, those are all great souls, Prabhupada and the people in the Chaitanya Charitamrita and the Bhagavatam, and, you know, who am I? And, you know, part of that's true that we're there's two words in Sanskrit, anusharanam, and I forget the other word, but following in the footsteps of a great soul or trying to imitate. And we're told not to try to imitate, but to follow in the footsteps. Yet at the same time, Prabhupada really challenged us. I was wondering if we could do a little, let's do a little test here. Can you all raise your hand if you have heard of the suite called Simply Wonderfuls? Okay.
Only few. Oh, there you go.
That's it? Just about 10 of you? No, there's a few more. Simply Wonderfuls. What are they made of, Devi?
Powdered milk and sugar.
Yeah.
Fruit.
And something else. Usually raisins or cashews. And yeah. So, but I bet you probably most of you don't know the story behind them. Oh, there we go. Powdered milk, sugar, milk, Diti saying, and butter. Yeah, butter, of course. Yes, thank you. All really great ingredients. Okay, you can lower your hands now. But the story behind them is highlights this point. So the devotees in New Vrindavan made them for Prabhupada. I think they just kind of, you know, thought it was speculated and threw it together, and they gave it to Prabhupada. And he tasted it and he said, "This is simply wonderful." They didn't have a name yet, so he said, "This is simply wonderful." Okay, so that's the story of that. But there's another instruction behind this. So then one of the leaders there said, "Prabhupada, you are simply wonderful." And then you can't hear it unless you listen to the tape, because he didn't say it loudly, but very softly, Prabhupada says into the microphone, "You all become." Right? So you know, the devotees saying, "No, Prabhupada, you're simply wonderful." And then he was saying, "You all become." And I for some reason, when I heard that, it really struck me that, you know, Prabhupada really, you know, threw down the gauntlet. He really challenged us not to just be like, you know, yeah, I believe in God. It's kind of nice. You know, once a week I go to the church. You know, I'm not trying to criticize other religions, but he really challenged us to become like a really good devotees and really, you know, fully in love with Krishna. And it was really kind of one of his, his teachings were very strong. I'm just reading the 5th canto, 5th chapter. Rishabdev is preaching so strongly, and Prabhupada is also speaking so strongly. And sometimes I think, you know, we also think of what Prabhupada did, like, you know, going on the Jaladuta and suffering the 2 heart attacks, and and getting off the boat, not knowing whether to turn left or right. And we kind of think of it almost like a Leela. And it is a Leela in this, but I think that can be dangerous also, because we may sometimes think, oh, well, he didn't really suffer. The heart attacks was just his relationship with Krishna. I think it's really important to think Prabhupada really did go through the hard times. He really didn't have any money. He really didn't have any followers. He really did have 2 heart attacks. And that's what makes him so amazing, that he was, what was the word, adaptable and resilient, and overcame these things. Not that it was just, oh, it's just Leela. He actually suffered like that, in order so that we could have calls like this and all of us become devotees. So yeah, it's one thing to say, yes, we could never be a Prabhupada or a Rupa Goswami or something like that, but we are meant to try to, in our own way and at our own pace, take up their challenge. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'd like to just add to that before we go back to the questioner. That,
I answered the question. What are you talking about?
No, I just wanted, before we go back to the person who asked the question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That, yeah, we sometimes it's a very human story. I'm just pegging on your point of Prabhupada being a divine, but that just because you're a pure devotee doesn't mean you're not a human. In fact, you're the best human. And I think if we look at Arjuna and we look at, all the different stories in the Bhagavatam of humans and failing in many cases. I mean, Arjuna's was a failure at that point where he was actually just totally losing it and failing it. And because we can identify so much with that struggle and with that failure, and to understand that being a pure devotee doesn't mean suddenly everything's cool, everything's fine, and we're totally untouched by human emotions, right?
Yeah. Actually,
reading the part of Yudhisthira coming toward, grandfather Bhishma was about to leave his body, and Yudhisthira was coming, and Yudhisthira was full of lament after the war.
Right. Yeah.
And then, so the lessons for us in the teachings are, how do they actually process that? How do they go through that?
Yeah.
Because that's where we'll learn in our own small ways to apply that in our own small life.
Yeah.
And that's where the transformation happens. That's where the shelter comes. That's where we feel not so alone.
Actually, there's one place in the Bhagavatam where after the battle of Kurukshetra is over, after Lord Bhishma Dev is gone, after Yudhisthira is established as a king, and basically Yudhisthira just goes, whew, and Prabhupada writes in the purport that, he had that human sentiment. He's a pure devotee, and he also just had a human sentiment that, oh God, that was tough. We have 2 hands up, unless they haven't gone off having the hands. Andavi and Aditya, and
they're like sweet ball, simply wonderful hands.
Yeah, I don't know if there's still. Yeah, now Govinda also has his hand up. So I don't know, Yash. You decide who should talk next. You're the boss.
Yeah, I think the first one I saw was Andavi, so I unmuted you, so you should be able to talk.
I know, I'm so sorry. I think it was a mistake. Sorry.
Oh, no problem. Okay.
No problem.
Aditya Vishesh.
Hare Krishna from Canada. Thank you so much for speaking to us. I really appreciate it. My question is, Mataji talked about flexibility and agility at the beginning of the talk, and she mentioned that those are 2 things that we can kind of extrapolate from adaptability. So I'm kind of wondering if flexibility and adaptability, like which practices and principles can they apply to, or are principles and practices set in stone? Thank you.
Whoa. Well, I do. Well, Devi, you want to, or you want me?
Go ahead, jump in.
Okay. So let me make sure I got it right. What were the 2 words? Agility and flexibility?
Yeah, that was correct.
Well, if you're interested, in the 6th chapter of the Nectar of Devotion, Prabhupada talks about the difference between a principle and a detail. And this is like super important because, you know, especially for all you guys, because you guys are all like, you know, the future leaders of ISKCON. And this is such an important concept to understand really deeply, that because you were saying, do principles ever change? Something that's actually a principle, by definition, should be true in all times, all places, and all circumstances. And then Prabhupada in the 6th chapter, he says there's also something called a detail. And that's where there's these Sanskrit words, desha, kala, patra, time, place, and circumstance come in. And so adjusting things according to, you know, the time, place, and circumstance. And it's really important. So one time, Burijan Prabhu asked Prabhupada, how do you know the difference between a principle that you can never change and a detail that would be good to change to be more relevant to the world, etc.? And Prabhupada gave a really enigmatic answer. He said, that takes some intelligence. So I'm really praying that all of you have that intelligence for the future of Prabhupada society, because that really is super important. Because if we change a detail, then we're really in trouble. And if we don't change
to change a principle.
Change the principles, thank you. Just seeing if you're awake there, David. If we don't change a detail, then we can easily be irrelevant to the world that we're trying to introduce to Krishna consciousness. So some things are unchangeable. Like, you know, we're not, you know, 50 years from now, we're not going to say, okay, the Maha Mantra, that's kind of passé. Now we should, you know, chant some other mantra. Or, you know, so there's obviously things that are kind of etched in stone. But there's a lot of stuff that is not etched in stone, but we can adjust to, and we should, in order to, just like some devotees are still, and by the way, me included, we're still sometimes using like words from the 60s. You know, you still see devotees, something like, well, that subject was really far out, you know, or you know, or things like that. Whereas, you know, a lot of the words that we use growing up are not words that are really in vogue today. So adjusting our language, you know, when I first joined in the mid 70s, the idea of like having a yoga studio in Krishna consciousness, are you kidding? You know, whereas now it's obviously a great way to introduce people to Krishna consciousness. So we definitely want to be agile and flexible in, especially in the ways that we relate to the world, as long as we're true to our principles. And then in our personal lives, I don't know, I'd have to, maybe Ananda has better thoughts on this, but we may be a little bit more conservative than in our ways that we, you know, do outreach or relate to the world. Especially if we decide that we take initiation, then we've taken some vows. So those are kind of etched in stone. Anyway, I hope that helped a little bit. I hope it even applied to what you were talking about. But that idea of the difference between principles and details is like super important. And sometimes you see the controversies in ISKCON are there because are people thinking that such and such is a principle or that such and such is a detail?
Just to add to that, I think we have a responsibility to be adaptable. And I would say words like flexibility, being agile, I would add creativity. Is really important in both in our spiritual life. Not that you're creative with, you know, we know the boundary, but there's a certain aliveness that adaptability calls us to be, to just to start driving your life, start, you know, heading in the direction where you want to go. Too often we end up, you know, in being a victim or just pointing the finger at everybody else and telling them, you know, and you know, whatever, doing all the things that stop us from actually, you know, making the changes we need to have in our life. So I think there's always going to be room for daily or weekly, you know, reflections on how I'm doing, making those changes, adapting. Sometimes there'll be small turns, sometimes there'll be big turns. But, you know, it's it can be really energizing to do that. And so once the boundary is clear and the difference between, principles and details are clear, then I would say just fly with it, like do amazing things, just, get going. And I think Prabhupada, really, really sent devotees off with that message, figure it out, go do it for Krishna,
Yeah. And you were saying, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur said that every Ekadasi you can look back at the last 2 weeks and how did I do? And what adjustments do I want to make to be better?
Yeah.
So we go on to Govinda.
Yeah, I think Govinda, if you want to go.
There's one other hand up, Yash, if you want to go to the other person.
Yeah, sure. Devansh, do you want to go?
Yeah, I'll go. Haribol, thank you. So you mentioned that how isolation can be beneficial for our character, and we can do a lot of growing. However, isolation can also be like easily accompanied with loneliness. So I was wondering, what steps can we take to shift our mindset to better benefit our mental health?
Wow.
Ooh, great question. A very good question and a very important question.
Yeah.
The whole notion of mental health and how to make sure we have our life in balance, really.
Thank you.
Yeah, geez. And it was in one place, Prabhupada writes that the mental diseases in Kali Yuga are worse than the physical ones. So it really is important. But you want suggestions. Davey, we can't just say it's a good question. We have to.
Well, no, I know, because and good questions don't have any easy answers necessarily. But it's good to put out there. And yes, loneliness is a big challenge in the world. And again, not just through this coronavirus, but on a regular basis. And, I think for me, I like to go back to, that verse in the Gita that says, if you have a balance between recreation, eating, sleep, what's the other one?
Eating, sleeping, working, and recreation. Working
and recreation. And then, really getting help if we're feeling ourselves alone or lonely. There is a lot of help available. There's even now within ISKCON, there are a lot of professional counselors. So whether you need help on that level or just, again, taking the time to acknowledge I'm feeling this pain or I'm feeling this loneliness or this is something I need to address. It's, what Brene Brown calls stepping into that vulnerability, that area of saying, I shouldn't feel like this. And, maybe there's something wrong with me because I feel like this, or I'm embarrassed to say I feel like this. But by stepping into those things, that's where you can begin. They become less in your life, she says, the minute you start shining a light on that. And those vulnerabilities, those shame gremlins begin to get less.
Shame gremlins, that's a good vision.
Yeah, that the voices in our head, the idea of not being worthy, the idea of, who cares for me anyway. And so I would just really say it takes courage to actually, say that and to ask a question like that or to begin that conversation with somebody. But it's such an important thing to do. And this is why Sangha is so important, or this is why mentorship is so important. And this is why even if we need to being able to have a therapist. I was raised in Ireland. There was never such a thing as a therapist when we were growing up in Ireland, but I learned it was always a big American thing. And when you're in Ireland growing up, America is just like the land of the golden sun, everything there is, and then you get to America and it's a little bit of a different story. But these, mental health is something like physical health that can actually be helped. and make an effort to get that help if you feel those things creeping into your life.
And I was thinking friendships are really important to fight off loneliness. And, we have tons of acquaintances in the world. At least I do in ISKCON, but, like friends that I could really pour my heart out to, probably maybe 3 or 4. And I think that's good. I'm lucky that I have that in those that in my life. And then, Devi, would it be okay to mention Rambaru? Anyone really needed to? We have Rambaru Mataji, Prabhupada disciple. Maybe you know her. Her son's kind of famous, Muddy. Everyone refers to him as Muddy. Madan Mohan is his name. And she's a therapist and a chaplain. And we can. How would they on the ISKCON of DC website? Her contact information.
Yeah, not yet. Well, yes, at the Speak Up page, but she does a thing called, she is the director of a program called Karuna Care, just to, and I can put her email, Yash, we can figure out whoever wants to talk to her, but we will have a thing on our website that you can find out her address as well.
And she's totally confidential, and she has the amazing combination of being a professional and also knowing the devotee world so well. And she's really a great soul to boot. Also Mother Bhakti, some people know her, lives in Gainesville, Florida, other devotees. So yeah, looking for help and that if needed, and also just having friends.
Yeah, those are really good things. I think for me, what the lesson of coronavirus is how when things get out of balance, things break down. And so, this virus is because this world is so out of balance in so many ways. And it's now kind of ground to a halt. Somebody was saying to me the other day, it's like the earth had a heart attack and it's just like, limping along. And so when we find in our own lives that there's things out of balance, things will fall apart. And although it's painful, that's generally a good thing because it means you can take a look at where do I have to fix? What do I have to repair? What do I have to do differently? I hope, although I doubt, I think a lot of people will do that, but collectively the world's leaders are probably not going to be able to say, yes, we've got to slow things down and how we're exploiting the earth and animals and all kinds of things. But that's just the way we as individuals work and the world works. If things get out of balance, it will fall apart and then we have to put it back together again. So the same things in our personal life. And if being alone in this coronavirus is highlighting things in our lives that are pain points, that's a very good thing because pain is just a way that tells us something needs attention. And if we have to be, and then we can be radically honest with ourselves because really deep down, generally we know it, but we need some help to coax it out of us. It's often described that the soul is very shy. So very often connected to that we have to fess up to saying, yeah, I've got to do this differently. And this is why this is where I am right now. And the coronavirus has really kind of exposed a lot of nerve points for many people. And if we're smart, we'll be able to actually transform that, change it and say, okay, now I can actually do it differently.
Yeah, actually you bring up just something that's, and I hope that for your generation, it's not as big an issue as it's been for my generation, but it's been very hard for people, as you were quoting Brene Brown, devotees in my generation to be vulnerable, to go up to and especially with social media, to go up to someone and say, hey, I'm actually really struggling or I'm having trouble with one of the regulated principles and everyone, and you're afraid of what are they going to think of me, or I won't be able to offer artsy anymore, or it'll be on Facebook all over the world in the next 3 days, and because of that, so many in my generation have just kind of not seek the help of other Vaishnavas, but just led, kind of that lonely, suffering life, life of feeling guilty, or in the words of Brene Brown, feeling shame, and not feeling that they're being honest with themselves or with others. And the interesting thing is, my experience is when someone does come forward and say that, usually they're not criticized, or maybe somebody will say something, but usually most other devotees will think, wow, that person was honest. I wish I could be as honest as that person, And then there's also the balance that, we want to say, well, I just have to be honest. I'm a terrible person. I do all these terrible things. And at the same time, trying to really improve and not stick with that. So I probably said a lot there, but I think, and I'm hoping that you guys don't have that same kind of issues that my generation had.
I think it's a human thing. So
Yeah.
I think everybody will face it. But I think it's, I keep going back to that series of verses in the Gita. If you can't do this, do this. If you can't do this, do this. I think sometimes we're hard on ourselves as devotees because we want to be the best. We want to be pure devotees yesterday. And or we have expectations of others and this and that. So I think it's a thing we have, as you would say, it's a polarity to be managed.
Yes.
It's a human thing.
So what are we supposed to do, Yashi? We just keep going? I don't want to hold people up, but we do have 3 other hands up.
Yeah, I think we can take like 2 more questions, hopefully, or like 1 or 2, if you have the time, Prabhu and Mataji.
Yeah, it's good. That's all right with me.
Okay.
Davey, is that all right with you?
Yeah, I don't want to keep anybody waiting. So,
Yeah, we just don't want to, people have lives to live and they might feel guilty. Oh, what are people going to think of me if I get off the Zoom call?
We'll still love you.
Yeah, feel free. If anyone has to go off, that's fine. But I think Srivatsa, if you have a question, you can speak right now.
Sure. Thank you, Mataji and Prabhuji, for all of this. I had a question regarding Aditya's question about, you were talking about details and principles. So I was wondering about, and you mentioned that, and you're mentioning how Prabhupada mentioned that details and principles are identified through intelligence, or it takes intelligence to identify.
It takes a little intelligence, yeah.
So I was wondering how, like, as per my understanding, I thought that like one can develop intelligence by associating with devotees and reading Prabhupada's books. And I was just wondering, what approach should I take to seeing that a lot of devotees disagree on certain topics, even after taking plenty of devotee association and reading all of Prabhupada's books?
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, it's natural. Okay, it's natural that we have our, we see the world differently. Gosh, if we were in person, I would ask everyone to just blurt out some ideas, or maybe they could put in chat. What do you think are some of the reasons? Yeah, we have a chat feature here, right? If you go to the chat feature, what do you think are some of the reasons that one person or one devotee will see things differently than another devotee? What are some of the influences that would make us see differently? Our nature, yes, thank you, Ratish. Different upbringing, yep. Background, experience, well, these are all the best answers, yeah. I think one reason is that they might have different experience, correct, very good. Ego, that's also there. Personality, yep. Trauma, yes, if they had some traumatic prejudice.
Bias, yeah.
Wow, these are great answers, yes. The only thing I might add, I mean, you got them all, is maybe purva samskars, impressions from previous lifetimes in our mind. We should be unified on the basic things of Krishna consciousness, the principles, and we should allow for diversity. right? I'm sure many of you, for example, something that I've been working on for a number of years is this.
Why is your health low?
Well, we have someone who's not. Jay, you're not on mute.
Health looks low. Like.
Hey, Kari, you're not on mute. And there we go. Someone else is not on mute. I think everyone got unmuted. Oh, is that what happened, Sham? Thanks. Thank you. Sham is our tech support. All right, cool. So it's not unusual. And then what happens is then people go on social media and it seems like the differences are really big. And what also happens is because of the modes of passion and ignorance, you and I might agree on 98% of life. And if everyone could mute, that would be really helpful. But what happens is we tend to focus on that 2% difference. You know, there's this joke that a person was on the bridge ready to jump off the bridge and commit suicide, and a good Samaritan now. Whoops.
No. You have to unmute yourself.
There we go. I don't know what you didn't hear or did hear, but I'll start the story that there's a guy who's on a bridge ready to jump off the bridge and commit suicide. And a good Samaritan comes along and he tries to think, oh, how can I get this person to not jump off the bridge? So he said, are you a Christian? And the man says, yes, I'm a Christian. Oh, okay, that's fantastic. What denomination are you? And the person's ready to jump off the bridge says, I'm a Baptist. And the guy says, oh, that's fantastic. I'm a Baptist too. And then are you a Baptist of the Northern Baptist or the Southern Baptist? And the guy says, I'm a Southern Baptist. And then the Good Samaritan said, well, that's fantastic. I'm also a Southern Baptist. Amazing. And are you a Southern Baptist reform of 1857 or a Southern Baptist reform of 1898? And the guy says, 1898. And then he says, die, you rascal. So, you know, the idea of being that, you know, the little differences sometimes we focus on. And so that's something that we need to work on. I could give a whole talk on conflict resolution at another time. But we do have these differences, but Prabhupada's solution was unity in diversity. And that can really solve a lot of issues, that we remain unified. We can still have kirtan together and prasadam together and all that, even if you think the only way to be a devotee is to wear dhoti, kurta, and sari, and I think, you know, pants and whatever are totally fine, you know, or this or that, the different, or that I prefer the original books that Prabhupada wrote and I prefer the ones that were edited for clarity. You know, we can have those differences and still be united. And that is, again, you know, talking about you guys, that is one of your biggest challenges going forward and helping to run this society over the next 50 years is those two things. If you can remember those two things, principles and details and unity and diversity, you will make this a great society. There's my, I'm gonna get off my
soapbox.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prabhu.
And Vrindapriya put in the quote from Prabhupada that disunity between individual souls is so strong within the material world that even in a society of Krishna conscious members sometimes appear disunited due to their different opinions and leaning towards material things. Actually, there can be, and there's only one goal, to serve Krishna to one's best ability. Therefore, if there is some disagreement over service, such a disagreement is to be taken as spiritual. Does that answer your question, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you so much.
Okay. And I'll just end then with an Aesop's fable that Prabhupada taught, that the father of, he was getting old and was ready to pass away, and he had many sons, and the sons were asking, well, what lesson do you have for us? So he said, bring a bunch of sticks. and they brought a bunch of sticks, and he said, tie them together. Okay, they all tied them together. He said, now try to break them. And they couldn't be broken. And then he said, take out the sticks one by one. Okay, now try to break them. And they were easy to break. So basically the moral of the story is that united we stand, divided we fall. So that's why one of the things I love so much about TSI, it really is it's a way to bring people together. And I'm sure you all have different opinions about things, but with a common goal of some sangha and having fun together in Krishna consciousness.
To add to that, I think when we are dealing with people who have different opinions or dealing with friends who have different opinions, that we can also practice being curious and kind of wanting to learn, how is it? Help me understand how you think like that. Because until we have to have a culture where we're actually able to hear each other. We talk about hearing a lot as number one practice, but we sometimes don't hear each other very well. And one thing I learned about listening is that you don't have to agree with the person, or you don't have to do what the person wants you to do. But good listening conversations are so powerful and so satisfying and so transformative. So I'd encourage you to learn how to do that.
Thank you. Yes, and being patient. Prabhupada, he gave the example of Lord Chaitanya. He sat for 7 days without saying anything and just listened to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Yeah. And then he said the example, even in the first chapter of the Gita, Arjuna wasn't speaking at the highest level, but Krishna just waited patiently and listened carefully, and then responded at the right time.
Yeah, and it's always good to have somebody who thinks like you, so you can vent with them. Like, how can those crazy people think like that? But then, so you have a balance of being able to listen, but also to be able to, find your tribe.
Yes. Darshina writes that her father, I guess, or his father says, focus more on Leela. You can't argue too much about Leela. Well, I get you. We can find ways. Than philosophy. But
definitely.
Yeah, but at least I think paneer sabjis, no one fights about it.
Oh, yes, they do.
Oh, that's right. If it's not
dairy.
Okay, gosh, we'll fight about anything. But usually in prasadam, it's wonderful. Everyone's happy. Okay,
it's 8:20. I have just a finish up, a rounding off activity, unless there are any more questions. Yash?
Yeah, I think we can call it here with the questions. And then if you want to do what you were saying with the activity, Mataji, that's totally fine.
Okay, so I just wanted 5 people to say one thing they found useful about today's conversation and sharing. You could unmute and share it, which would be better than just...
Or you could type it in the chat.
Yeah, or you could type it in the chat, but I'd like to hear your voice.
Oh, sorry. You're the president. I should follow your instructions.
Yes, you should. I am the Supreme Temple President. Everybody has to do what I tell them to do. So we'll finish once 5 people share one thing.
Otherwise, we'll be here till midnight.
I know. One thing they found useful from this evening's adaptability discussion.
Hare Krishna Mataji. My name is Sundari Radha from Chicago.
Hey.
I really appreciated your point about pain being a signal, like a red flag for you to look deeper, and not just shying away from the pain, but using it as a resource to help us get better.
Wonderful, thank you.
And Hare Krishna Prabhu too. Thank you. Thanks to both of you.
Hare Krishna.
Jay Devaki, did you have something with that activity?
Yes.
I really liked the point, I think you said, Prabhu, about Bhaktivinoda Thakur saying on every Ekadashi to reflect, kind of reflect on the last 2 weeks. I know I'm someone that usually, I don't like Ekadashi, so it's kind of annoying when it comes, but that's a nice positive way to like use that time instead of being like sad you can't eat grains. I also I liked a lot of points, but I also liked the points Mother Ananda Vrindavan was saying about coronavirus and how the earth is functioning now, and just kind of how we can still, even when we do get out of balance, how we can use it as an opportunity to look closer ourselves so we can grow. So thank you both so much. I'm really grateful.
Thanks, Devi.
Thank you. How come Ekadasi is so loved?
Our son is definitely like, oh no, it's Ekadasi.
Okay, 3 more, then we're done.
Hi, both Ritesh here. Oh, sorry. I'll just do one real quick. Yes. I just like the concepts that were brought up about unity and diversity, as well as principles and details, and keeping those 2 things as kind of a balance for the future. So thank you.
Thank you. Whereas Jayadvaita Swami said, unity in diversity, not unity in versity.
Not unity in
perversity.
God. Thank you, Ratish.
Thanks, Ratish.
From the period, did you want to go?
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say, I also liked the point about pain. I thought that was a really neat point. Does it count if I repeat what someone else said?
Yes, it's fine.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. It's an important point. Thank you.
One last one.
Hare Krishna, this is Harini. Haribol. Mataji, I really liked your point about reading, especially like when you open up Prabhupada's books, to just, take that as a prayer to the book itself and ask, what am I supposed to be gaining from this reading for today, and putting a time for yourself and sticking to it and reading every day. I think that's a very practical example, something we can do during this time. So I'm really going to try to abide by that. So thank you.
Great.
Hi, thank you, Harini.
All right. We did it.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Could I quick add something?
Sure.
So my name is Devi, Dasi, Hare Krishna, and this is the first time I am listening to you, and I'm very grateful and really impressed, but mostly grateful that that devotees like you, like senior devotees, that are putting so much and giving so much of your experiences and your knowledge to the youth. I really appreciate that. I hope I can keep listening to you in other times. And yeah, it'll be so amazing to have that kind of seminar or talk meeting about conflicts and resolutions, because I think we need it. It's a need. So thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. Thank you to all of you. It was such a joy seeing all your names and hearing some of you. Be well, stay safe, and we hope to see you soon, or at least talk soon. Raj?
Yes, Hare Krishna. Thank you. Whatever you said, perfect.
Yeah, thank you so much, Prabhuji and Mataji. That was our great first intro talk. So we were actually thinking about doing this for a while, and then we finally got down to it and started planning it. We thought that the best way to even open it up was with you guys who have, TSI, like our mission, what we're trying to do. So thank you so much for the wonderful talk. And thank everyone else who joined on the call. Just while you guys are still here, we had a couple of announcements. for TSI and things that we're looking forward to that are coming up. So one thing is tomorrow we'll have a newsletter being sent out. So make sure you check your emails, and also the website. We'll link that later on tomorrow. You'll see like all the news that what we're keeping up with at TSI, what we're planning on doing in the future. Actually, one of those is an internship. So for those of you in high school and college, look out for that. I won't say what it is right now, but you can definitely check that out tomorrow on the website. There'll be an application and everything, and we're really looking forward to keeping that one going. Another thing that we'll have is next week we'll have a talk with Psi Chapters. So this is another initiative that we've been trying to start with local communities. So right now we have about 4 communities: Chicago, Jersey, DC, and Atlanta. And with these communities, we have the local youth meeting together. We're trying to do a monthly basis, even with this virus going around. So next week we'll have Kirtan Premi Prabhu be talking to that community. And we decided that we'll actually open it up to everyone. So we'll send out exactly how we did it this time with like another Zoom link, the meeting ID and the password for the meeting. And hopefully we have no troubles with that, but we'd love to see all of you guys at the next meeting. It'll be 7 Eastern again, same time, and we'll do it in the same format. And hopefully we'll keep that discussion going. Other than that, I just want to thank you guys once again for joining in on the call, and thank you, Prabhuji and Mataji, once again for the wonderful seminar. And hopefully we get to hear from you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, well, everyone. Thank you.